8 centuries have passed, and one of history's greatest riddles remains locked away. A man who conquered the known world vanished without a trace when death finally claimed him, leaving behind a mystery that would baffle scholars, archaeologists, and explorers for generations to come. Welcome to Infinite Findings, where we uncover the world's most fascinating mysteries and the extraordinary efforts made to solve them. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most intriguing cases of historical concealment ever attempted and the surprising technological breakthrough it sparked. In 2009, a small but determined team arrived in remote Mongolia with equipment that seemed pulled from a science fiction film. Cutting-edge satellites, high-tech drones, and ground-penetrating radar technology powerful enough to see beneath the Earth itself. They had come to find something that had eluded the world for nearly 800 years. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. These researchers made a deliberate and remarkable decision. They would search with every tool at their disposal, yet they had already committed themselves to never digging. They would hunt without disturbing. They would investigate without invading. And what they eventually discovered would transform our understanding of respect, archaeology, and the boundaries of scientific inquiry. Let's separate fact from fiction, because understanding what actually happened requires clearing away centuries of legend and embellishment. Genghis Khan, born Temujin, died in August of 1227. He was leading a military campaign against the Western Shia dynasty at the height of an empire so vast it stretched across nearly every corner of the world people knew. His death marked the end of an era, yet somehow it became the beginning of history's most carefully guarded secret. What occurred immediately after his death is something we still struggle to piece together with certainty. That isn't accidental. The historical record surrounding his burial was constructed deliberately to remain obscure, even to this day. The secret history of the Mongols, the closest surviving account written by Mongol hands themselves, provides the first clues. It reveals that the Khan made an explicit request before his death. He wanted no monument, no marker, no public ritual. He desired instead a burial befitting the traditional customs of his people, where graves were kept humble and unmarked, deliberately free from the pomp and grandeur that other rulers throughout history obsessed over. Think about that for a moment. A man had just finished building the largest contiguous empire ever to exist in human history. Most rulers in such a position would demand the most elaborate tomb imaginable. Genghis Khan demanded the opposite. But as centuries passed, stories grew darker and more dramatic. Chroniclers writing decades after the Khan's death began adding layers to the narrative. They wrote of soldiers who dug the grave, only to be executed afterward to preserve its secret. Then those who carried out those executions were themselves silenced permanently. Legends spoke of a river deliberately diverted to flow across the burial site, erasing any visible trace it ever existed. These accounts became so widely repeated, they calcified into what felt like established history. But here's the critical part. Many of these dramatic details are extraordinarily difficult to verify through reliable contemporary sources. Historians studying the original records have increasingly concluded that these embellishments were added later, layered onto a historical account that was already uncertain and intentionally vague. What remains undisputed, however, is the outcome. Genghis Khan's actual burial location was never documented in any surviving records. It was apparently never physically marked in any way that later generations could recognize. For 800 years, it has remained one of archaeology's most stubbornly persistent unsolved questions. That such a powerful figure would go to such lengths to ensure complete anonymity after death stands in striking contrast to virtually every other ruler who ever lived. Consider the Egyptians. They built pyramids so massive and permanent they were visible for miles across the desert, specifically designed to be discovered and marveled at centuries later. Chinese emperors constructed entire subterranean cities complete with armies of terracotta soldiers, all created for the explicit purpose of being found and admired by future generations. They wanted immortality through spectacle. Genghis Khan pursued the opposite path entirely. A man who had unified the largest territory ever controlled by a single empire seemed determined to ensure he would leave no physical monument behind. Historians have puzzled over this contradiction for centuries, and whatever motivated this choice, it has proven extraordinarily effective for nearly 800 years. But here's where geography becomes destiny. In northern Mongolia exists a place called the Ikarig. The name translates to the Great Taboo. Researchers often call it simply the Forbidden Zone. It spans roughly 90 square miles and remained almost entirely sealed off to outsiders for centuries and centuries. This wasn't merely local superstition. This was an extensively documented, officially enforced prohibition. For generations after Genghis Khan's death, this region was treated as sacred and strictly off-limits under successive Mongolian traditions, specifically out of respect for the presumed location of the Khan's grave somewhere within its boundaries. What makes this remarkable is the persistence. As the Mongol Empire itself declined and fractured, the prohibition didn't fade away. Instead, it endured through centuries of Mongolian history, continuously reinforced by successive rulers and cultures. Then, when Mongolia fell under Soviet-aligned communist control in the 20th century, the same general area became closed off for entirely different reasons. The communist government added military and political restrictions on top of the existing religious taboo. The outcome was stunning in its totality. From 1227 until 1991, when Mongolia's communist government finally collapsed and the country began opening to outside researchers, this 90-square-mile region remained among the most inaccessible places on the entire planet. Think about that timeline. For 764 years, a combination of religious prohibition and state restriction kept this territory sealed. That's longer than the entire history of the printing press. It's longer than the existence of most modern nation-states. Few outside archaeologists or historians were ever permitted to conduct any systematic survey there. When modern researchers finally gained genuine access in the 1990s, they were looking at a landscape that had gone essentially unexamined by professional archaeology for the better part of 800 years. Within that vast forbidden zone, one specific landmark had consistently drawn the most serious scholarly attention for over a century. A mountain called Burkhan Kaldun. The secret history of the Mongols contains a deeply personal account of Genghis Khan's connection to this place. When he was still known as Temujin, a young man fleeing from enemies, he took refuge on the slopes of this mountain. According to the text, he experienced profound gratitude toward the peak for protecting him. That early personal association, combined with later accounts suggesting Genghis Khan specifically requested burial somewhere near this mountain, led historians and archaeologists to treat Burkhan Kaldun as the single most credible candidate for his final resting place. The mountain is genuinely difficult terrain. Dense forests cover its summit and surrounding slopes, making any physical search extraordinarily challenging. Yet its cultural and historical significance has only grown more recognized over time. In 2015, Burkhan Kaldun and its surrounding landscape received official designation as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The justification wasn't primarily archaeological curiosity about a missing grave. Instead, UNESCO specifically cited the region's deep continuous association with Mongolian shamanistic and Buddhist worship practices connected to Genghis Khan's spiritual legacy. This wasn't about solving a puzzle. It was about acknowledging genuine centuries-old religious significance still actively maintained by living communities. That distinction matters enormously to what came next. By the late 2000s, technological advancement had reached a point where searching for the Khan's tomb without disturbing the ground had become theoretically possible. A researcher named Albert Lin, working with a team of specialists, began developing an innovative strategy. They would bring satellite technology, aerial drones, and ground-penetrating radar to Mongolia. They would scan the Forbidden Zone with unprecedented sophistication. They would look for evidence of disturbance, buried structures, anything that might indicate a burial site. But they had set one absolute boundary before the expedition even began. Not a single shovel would touch the earth. Not one excavation would occur. That self-imposed limitation wasn't born from technical incapability. It came from respect for the cultural wishes of the Mongolian people and their spiritual traditions. The 2009 expedition proceeded with extraordinary care. The technology they employed worked by remote sensing, analyzing the Earth from above and through non-invasive subsurface imaging. Their drones captured high-resolution imagery. Satellites provided comparative data. Ground-penetrating radar essentially allowed them to see into the soil itself. They divided their survey area into sections, feeding the satellite images into a novel crowdsourcing platform where thousands of volunteers worldwide could examine small pieces of the larger puzzle and flag anomalies they detected. What they found didn't include Genghis Khan's tomb. That wasn't the most important discovery, though. They documented thousands of scattered artifacts previously unknown to archaeology. They identified dozens of ancient sites never before systematically recorded. They generated an extensive new map of the region's archaeological heritage. But perhaps most significantly, they pioneered a technological approach that would echo far into the future. Now jump forward to 2014. A Malaysia Airlines aircraft carrying 239 people disappeared over the Indian Ocean. The disappearance of flight MH370 became one of aviation's greatest mysteries. Suddenly, search efforts that had seemed impossible expanded to involve multiple nations and international organizations. The technology that Albert Lin's team had refined in the mountains of Mongolia was repurposed for this urgent search. The core concept was identical. Take enormous satellite images of vast ocean areas, break them into manageable sections, ask thousands of volunteers to examine those sections carefully, flag anything unusual, aggregate their observations. The software architecture was essentially the same. The platform design remained fundamentally unchanged. The basic insight that ordinary people, given the right small piece of a much larger picture, can collectively identify anomalies no small team of experts could review quickly enough remained the central organizing principle. The crowdsourcing tool, originally built to respectfully hunt for an ancient grave, became a mechanism for searching across the world's oceans. It's genuinely remarkable to sit with that connection. A piece of technology developed specifically to avoid disturbing a sacred site in Mongolia ended up helping 8 million strangers look together across the ocean for a vanished aircraft when families desperately needed someone to find it. But let's be honest about what we don't know and what the technology actually accomplishes. Several of the most dramatic elements commonly repeated about Genghis Khan's burial remain extraordinarily difficult to verify through reliable contemporary sources. The mass execution of gravediggers, the deliberate river diversion, the permanent erasure of physical markers. Many historians now view these as later embellishments rather than confirmed facts. The historical record simply isn't reliable enough to confirm them. Second, even the most sophisticated remote sensing technology has genuine limitations that only excavation can overcome. Ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery can identify disturbed soil, buried structures, and subsurface anomalies, but they cannot confirm the specific identity or contents of whatever is buried at a location. A genuinely promising anomaly detected through these methods would require some form of direct physical investigation to fully confirm. That investigation remains essentially off the table for well-understood cultural and religious reasons for the foreseeable future. Third, and this is crucial to understanding the complete picture, many Mongolians and Mongolian officials themselves do not view the tomb's continued concealment as a problem requiring solution. For a meaningful portion of Mongolia's population, the mystery remaining unsolved isn't a scientific failure. It's the fulfillment of exactly what Genghis Khan is believed to have wanted. It's an ongoing expression of respect for a figure many Mongolians continue to regard as spiritually significant. Their perspective matters here. These caveats don't diminish what Lin's project genuinely accomplished, but they mean the honest conclusion is that a mystery nearly 8 centuries old remains quite deliberately exactly that. Here's what truly sits with me about this story, and it isn't about satellites or drones or even Genghis Khan specifically. The most notable and in some ways most admirable decision made throughout this entire project wasn't about discovering something. It was about choosing not to. It was about accepting the boundaries that respectful, non-invasive investigation imposes upon itself rather than pushing past those limits simply because more aggressive methods might have produced more definitive or headline-worthy results. Lin's team had access, at least in principle, to considerably more invasive archaeological techniques that might have moved the search closer to a conclusive answer. They chose not to employ them. That choice wasn't born from technical limitation. It came from a commitment to disregard the deeply held beliefs of the very communities whose cooperation and whose land made the search possible in the first place. That's a profoundly different story than the one the headline "Mystery Finally Solved" usually promises. And I think it's a better one. Not every mystery needs to be forced open simply because modern technology has finally made forcing it open theoretically possible. Sometimes the more remarkable achievement is a team of researchers armed with exactly the tools that could have pushed further, choosing instead to stop precisely where respect for the people connected to that mystery required them to. There's a broader pattern worth recognizing here, one that shows up again and again whenever modern science and technology encounter a culturally or spiritually significant site somewhere in the world. The instinct to apply every available tool toward finally definitively answering an old question is genuinely powerful. It often comes from a place of authentic intellectual curiosity rather than any disrespect. But curiosity and respect don't always point in the same direction. This project stands out precisely because its leadership recognized that tension early and built an entire methodology around resolving it in favor of respect rather than treating respect as an unfortunate external limitation. For nearly 800 years, the tomb of Genghis Khan has remained exactly where it has always been. Unmarked, unrecorded, undiscovered. Protected first by ancient taboo and later by the sheer remoteness of a region closed to outsiders for the better part of a millennium. In 2009, a small team brought some of the most advanced, non-invasive archaeological technology available anywhere on Earth directly to the edge of that mystery. They deliberately chose not to cross the final boundary that might have solved it. What they found instead were thousands of scattered artifacts, dozens of newly documented ancient sites, and a genuinely innovative crowdsourcing platform that would later help search for a vanished airliner thousands of miles away on the far side of the world. Was this ever going to satisfy anyone hoping for a body, a name, or a definitive ending? No. In its own way, however, it was considerably more valuable than that. So the next time you encounter a headline declaring that Genghis Khan's tomb has finally been opened after 1,000 years, know that it hasn't. Know that the people closest to this mystery have never particularly wanted it to be. What actually happened out on those Mongolian mountains was something different entirely. It was a team of scientists proving that sometimes the most respectful thing you can do with an ancient secret is build the most sophisticated tools in the world, specifically to leave it exactly where it has always rested, completely undisturbed. The mountain keeps its secret. The taboo holds. And somewhere in the archives of satellite imaging data, the same basic technology originally created to look for a grave that was never meant to be found once helped millions of strangers look together for something that mattered desperately to the families who lost it. If this incredible intersection of history, technology, and ethics fascinated you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Infinite Findings for more mysteries and discoveries that challenge how we understand our world, and let us know in the comments which unsolved mystery you'd most like us to investigate next. Thanks for exploring this story with us, and we'll see you in the next discovery.